let's talk about the BCS format. The only thing I'll ask from you is to hear my perspective. I understand the BCS is probably one of the most controversial topics in the entire world of college football. Fans have a lot of negative or positive feelings towards that previous format before we went to the college football playoff in 2014. And you don't have to point out the obvious. I'm well aware that we most likely could never go back to that format. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Same thing with like NIL and the transfer portal. But I can still feel like this. I want to speak on that perspective. So what we'll do today is talk about the BCS format, a little bit of the history. You know, there's plenty of incredible video essays on YouTube diving into all the problems with the BCS that we could be here for 2 hours if I really wanted to reiterate that. I'll talk about it at a high level. We'll talk about the core of college football, why I think it connects to it, and what we should do moving forward. And if by the end of it, you truly feel that the BCS format was the big bad wolf of college football and you disagree with me, I'm open to being wrong. Let me know down in the comments down below. But with that being said, welcome to Rush the Field. Let's talk about the BCS format and how I think it should be back.
Liken the BCS to a bad disease like cancer. It's one thing when it affects people that you don't know, but it's another thing when it hits home.
If computers are really all they're cracked up to be, why didn't the ones from Jeff Sagarin and the New York and Seattle Times kick in with some artificial intelligence and spit out the decision that the final BCS declaration is that there be a playoff?
So what does the BCS even mean? Bowl Championship Series. So what was the problem that the BCS was going to fix? College football had a long-standing issue, even in 2024, on selecting who should move on to the postseason for the national championship. Before 1998, when the BCS was established, the national title was often decided by polls, leading to split championships, heated debates about who truly deserved the top spot. Sounds familiar, right? The BCS sought to fix this problem by creating a system that matched the top 2 teams in a single national championship game using the combination of human polls, computer rankings, and strength of schedule metrics. Despite its original intentions, the BCS underwent frequent changes throughout its 16-year lifespan as it tried to improve its formula and address the criticisms that continuously happened time and time again after each season. Adjustments were made to the weight of the human and computer rankings, how strength of schedule was calculated, and even the inclusion of additional data points like margin of victory. However, no iteration of the BCS was without flaws. The system sparked numerous controversies. In 2001, Nebraska played for a national championship without even winning its own conference. In 2003, LSU and USC both claimed national championships after the BCS excluded USC from the title game despite being ranked number 1 in the AP poll. Critics also argued the system favored traditional powerhouses and conferences with greater media influence, often leaving deserving smaller programs out of the major bowl games. Teams like Kansas State can tell you firsthand that the BCS process and the selection system screwed them out of many big-time moments. And at the time, college football did not know how to handle a BCS bowl buster, aka a group of 5 team who played at a very high level and thought they deserved to be in these conversations. And I'm not sitting here trying to debate whether or not they deserved it, but this is just the format that the BCS went under. Now, I want to make it very clear before I shift to my opinion and thoughts on the BCS. Do I think the BCS did a good job at selecting the teams for these big moments? Because it wasn't just the national championship, it was big major bowl games that had a lot of stakes behind them. Though there's a common opinion online that bowl games never mattered, going to a BCS bowl outside of the national championship was seen as a successful season. So even being screwed out of, say, the Sugar Bowl, though it wasn't the national championship, you were upset. And I do not agree with how they went about the selection process, relying on a computer, because that has been the biggest boogeyman in the entire BCS conversation. What I want back is not the selection. It is the ideology of how the BCS was formatted compared to the college football playoff that was implemented in 2014. Let's take a step back from the BCS, the playoffs, everything entirely, and have a baseline understanding of at least my perspective for the rest of the video. What does college football mean to you? It's a very simple question. Any answer would suffice. I mean, I wouldn't really love you just saying, oh, it's because I love football. That's the reason why I like college football. I want a little bit more. And feel free to put them in the comments below. I'll tell you a very simple one that I would probably answer with is it's just different than the NFL. Though college football has moved in a path to become NFL Junior, I still love this sport for how different it is at its core. The passion is at another level that could be bucketed into the rivalries, the fan environments. The fans themselves are just different. And I think a lot of people who would have that same answer would agree to that. But there's another part of that answer that I think people don't either want to admit or talk about. Josh Pate has said it before. College football is a regular season sport, in my opinion. If you disagree, I would love to hear your justification and reasoning. And it's not a black and white situation. There's definitely a gray area that we have to talk about. When I say college football is a regular season sport, why is that? To me, it's not always about the national championship. It's not about the one trophy at the end of the day, though the playoff has kind of presented it as such. To me, college football was all about who you were beating on Saturday in the fall, not some random Monday in the new year. And I mean, geez, if you want a trophy so bad, they give trophies for who you beat in the regular season. It wasn't about 130 teams all going for one opportunity at the one trophy at the end of the day, the national championship, because I think that's a joke. You're not telling me South Alabama and Alabama are playing for the same thing here. And I completely understand if you're an Alabama fan, a Georgia fan, an Ohio State fan, it is about national championships to you. And you guys have the biggest fan bases and you're probably the loudest about this. That's why you're probably going to disagree with me. But I'm asking you to take your fandom and take a step back with me and admit you really do care about the game. That's a regular season event. If you're an Alabama fan, you care about the Iron Bowl. That's a regular season event. It's about these huge matchups, and it doesn't matter if you're ranked, if you're the #1 team, if you're the worst team in your conference, you're going to go want to beat that team because it matters to you. As a fan, you have the passion to care about those moments. And that's what made college football so special to me. That's what made it so different than anything else that I can remember growing up watching. And sure, the NFL has rivalries, the NBA, the MLB, but I don't think they compare to what college football has, which is more about that logo versus that logo. Over the course of 80 plus years, my grandpa hated that team, your dad hated that team, I hate that team. Not for anything else, but they are our rivals, and that's all that matters to me. And the games are great because of it, because of that passion. But you may ask me, Tegan, that's not gone anywhere. There's still these intense rivalries. I feel like they've been diluted just a hair. And I think that's because of the college football playoff. Listen, I'm not trying to paint the college football playoff like it's this big boogeyman. It's the root of all my problems. I lay waking every night just thinking about the college football playoff. But I ask one simple question. Why did we need a college football playoff? This is not a trick question. It's a simple answer. We needed to figure out who was the most deserving national champion. Because of the horror stories of what happened during the BCS selection process, there was a notion and an opinion around that we could not get a national championship correct. We couldn't figure out who was the true deserving #1 team in the entire country. So then we went to 2014. People had hit a breaking point with the BCS because of those horror stories, thus launching the 4-team playoff. And you know what we found out? That ESPN could market to a whole new generation of fans, putting this "who's in" advertisement about the college football playoff. And little did we know, it would change the perspective of how we look at postseason games versus regular season games. And we kind of lost the plot. It's now become, no, we're going for the best team in the country. No, we're going to who's the most deserving team. I think of what just happened with Alabama and Florida State. I think of how people have been talking about the 12-team playoff because clearly 4 teams was not enough. We couldn't get enough teams to fight for the national championship. There's too many deserving teams that deserve an opportunity to go for that #1 title And the truth is, I don't think that you could find 12 teams deserving of the national championship. And one of the most common responses I hear when I say we can't find 12 teams deserving of the national championship, they go and point to the NFL. Hey, we got 14 teams in here that you can't tell me the 7th seed doesn't deserve an opportunity for the Super Bowl, although a lot of people are hoping to get rid of the 7th seed because it hasn't been competitive up to this point. You are now comparing 32 teams to 130 plus, all with very different schedules. The thing that I have a biggest problem when we're talking about strength of schedule is the wide variance. I mean, Boise State versus what Georgia played are not in the same stratosphere. And one of the biggest reasons why you could justify the NFL playoff is A, it's a postseason sport. It's all about the Super Bowl. B, the first team and the 32nd team, though have a difference in schedules, it's not a wide enough gap that you could be subjective about who you put in. If there was a committee, you want to bet they would put the Bengals into the playoffs because of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins and how well they were playing down the stretch. Of course they would, but because there's not this major gap in schedules and there's no subjectivity involved, they didn't make the playoffs, deservingly so. But in college football, it's all about subjectivity and how you weight how good a team is or how deserving a team is. And at some point, you're just never going to get it right. Because I thought the problem we were trying to solve is finding the most deserving champion. And the format that we have right now, I don't want to say Ohio State is not a deserving champion. According to the structure that we currently are in, they are deserving. My format wouldn't have them in a playoff because Michigan should have been the team that knocked them out of that contention. But because we wanted to expand this to include so many teams into the playoff for that one national championship, because people fantasized about the Cinderellas that they see in March. The Cinderellas that you see in football aren't the Cinderellas you want to see. It's a 9-3 LSU. It's a 10-2 Tennessee. It's a 10-2 Michigan. It's a Big Ten and SEC team that can match up week to week with their athletes and make a run like we're seeing with Ohio State. And my point of rivalries being a little bit diluted is that Michigan game is great for Michigan fans, but that should have been the game to knock out Ohio State. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't. I mean, Michigan fans will care, like I said, but they made the national championship and they're probably going to win it. And I remember time and time again during the 2024 season, people telling me, oh, it's a playoff elimination game. This is a playoff elimination game, that these games have more meaning. And I was told that they wouldn't have meaning. And in retrospect, if you look back at those games that people were marketing as these big playoff games, they weren't. They weren't playoff elimination games because teams get so many chances to make it in. And I'm sure you want me to answer the very simple thing that started out this video talking about the BCS format. I could talk about the playoff, but if I'm not providing any solutions that I would see from my perspective, then what's the point? But the BCS is so controversial, I needed to put this backstory. I needed to lay down the groundwork of what my perspective is, or you wouldn't understand what the rest of the video would mean. So let's talk about it. Why would I rather have the BCS than what we just outlined in the 12-team playoff? I hated the selection process of what the BCS was. I hated that every single year it was tinkered with a new poll, a new justification, a new viewpoint of strength of schedule. Every single year it was a new way of selecting the top 2 teams. What I want back is not that selection process. I don't want a computer completely dictating by some arbitrary poll and some viewpoint on strength of schedule, because I just don't think it would work. And to be honest, I don't even think the BCS or the playoff are either great options, because I don't think that the sport needs to be focused so heavily on the postseason. It's damn near impossible to figure out the best course of action when you have such a wide variance in schedules. That's why people talk about the Super League, aka NFL Junior, because then you are able to lump in a bunch of teams from the SEC, the Big Ten, the best of the ACC and the Big 12 and the Notre Dame. And if you lump them into a conference, at least the strength of schedules can be similar and you're facing off against everyone. But then you lose out on like the group of 5, and what I think makes college football so special is having that many teams and having that many fan bases lumped together. But what I liked about the BCS and that format was the tiering system of those postseason games and making those bowl games matter. because bowl games back then did matter. It was an indication of how your season went. And obviously, I don't think that the playoff is why bowl games don't matter as much. I think it's a multitude of ingredients baked into that cake. I think of NIL, the fact that people have a good idea of where their draft stock could be. You can hire out agents. I think the transfer portal, a bunch of different things are baked into that. So I'm not putting the full blame on the playoffs, but it didn't help. Having this notion that if you did not make the college football playoff, your season really didn't matter. I think it helped push players to see a perspective of, well, if I'm being told that this game doesn't matter, the fan base is being told that it doesn't matter, why am I going to risk injury to play in, I don't know, the Pop-Tart Bowl or the Cheez-It Bowl? It's what made me very happy to see guys even like Cam Ward just play the first half and Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders to play their full games. But specifically to the BCS, I like the fact that there was a second tier of bowl games. You were able to go play in the Sugar Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, and those were the pristine bowl games outside of what would have been the national championship. I think a good analogy to describe this tiering system is kind of like the WWE. And if you're not aware, you have the top world undisputed champion at the very top. And then you have your mid-card belts. Now, by the logic of what we have in college football, those mid-card belts wouldn't really matter because it's only about the undisputed championship. But in the WWE, there's just so many people, so many rosters, so much talent that if they were all going for that #1 championship, the product would be boring. Everyone's going for the same thing instead of making that mid-card title so important and having its own prestige. Say I go and win the Sugar Bowl. I went 10-2. I didn't make the national championship, but going to the Sugar Bowl was a big deal for this program. But the way that the college football playoff is formatted, the Sugar Bowl is just a step to the national championship. People see it as second round outs now. And I understand people want that opportunity to go to the national title. Completely understand that sounds like a good promise to have. The reality is they're never going to win it. The best chance I think we had to like a Cinderella run was potentially TCU, and that was one of the best teams in the Big 12. They go beat Michigan, and you see what happened in the national championship. It's just not feasible for these lower level teams to go on a run like that. I think it's even less likely in the 12-team playoff format because you're asking them to win even more games. In the BCS format, Boise State would be seen as an accomplishment to get to the Fiesta Bowl and not as seen as a first round out for them, because we have now convinced ourselves that they deserve an opportunity to go play for the national championship when in reality, they don't have a chance. They don't. And if you disagree with me on that, you're going to be waiting 80 plus years, if ever, for maybe a chance that a team like Boise State or a team like SMU to go win the national championship, when in the format that I want back, they just have to win one game for a prestigious award like winning the Orange Bowl, like winning the Sugar Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, all these other bowl games. They have to be a secondary prize. And the fact that we are expanding the playoff to 14, they're never going to reduce. They're only going to expand and add more auto bids and more inclusion for SEC and Big Ten teams. And I think we're going to end up losing what made college football so special, which to me was the regular season, which to me was the passion of the sport of facing off against one logo against another, not because there had to be a title on the line. That at its core is why I would prefer the BCS. And if you had told me a different idea of just doing the 4-team playoff, that would have been the compromise I would have preferred, but I do not see them reducing the amount of games after expansion. And if you're at this point of the video, thank you for watching and at least hearing my opinion. If I've convinced you that the BCS was the golden era of college football, then let me know. And if I didn't and you poke holes in my argument, I'm open to being wrong. You know, to my perspective, I think it's a solid argument. If there's holes in it, let me know. And thank you so much for taking the time to at least watch this video. With TikTok getting banned, it's been really tough to make content. That's where I started making content, and then we've gone to YouTube. And now I'm basically going to be diving headfirst into YouTube primarily. I love making these videos, and you guys truly interacting with me make my day. I get emails from you guys, which is linked into the bio if you want to send one. Or it just warms my heart, and I love getting those notifications on my phone. So thank you so much for watching Rush the Field. I will see you guys next time. We got some draft content to make maybe.